All right, AP Euro students, this is part two of our chapter 14, section 2, European Voyages of Discovery. So let's get going. Christopher Columbus is obviously a majorly controversial character. A lot of times when we're young, he's portrayed as a hero. Later on, we kind of find out, oh, there might be a different side to the story. And, we're not going to talk today about whether Columbus was a hero or a villain, but I want to bring something to your attention. In studying history, we have a tendency to judge men and their decisions in the past by what we know and believe and the way we view the world today, in the here and now. We also really need to understand these men and their decisions in the there and then. What were the decisions made? How did other people view them at that time period? What was the worldview at that period? The morality, the decisions, the viewpoint from the there and then, not only just from the here and now. Few things that we know about Columbus for sure is that he's an expert sailor. He was funded by Ferdinand and Isabella in 1492. A lot of his journals talk about his deeply religious motivations for going out and doing these voyages. And even to the end of his life, he had no idea that he had discovered a new continent. But he is very, very important because he's the first leader of explorers. Many people are going to follow him and follow in his steps and really come to a discovery of both the North and South American continents, and that is going to be a massive game changer for the world. Okay? Looking for the Indies. That's what Columbus and all these guys were trying to do. Bypass Africa, bypass the Arab states, and get directly over to where the goodies are at. And so in his first trip, he lands in San Salvador, what he calls San Salvador here. Okay, you see the landfall here. And he thought he was going to pass Japan and hit China. But after hitting San Salvador, he makes his way down to Cuba and turns around and goes home. He makes several more trips, and really on his second trip, he goes straight to Hispaniola, which is today makes up two countries, the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And the two pictures that you see here are pictures from Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, and I have been there. I took these pictures in 2010 when I was there. On this side, you have Columbus's brother's house, Domingo, who was the governor of Hispaniola. This right here is the very first church that was built in the Americas. It's really cool to get to see that and feel the history as you walk around inside of the first church in the Americas. So this is Hispaniola, and on Columbus's second journey, he brought settlers, seed, livestock, and made Domingo governor. It ends badly because they weren't as good at governing as they were at exploring, and they get sent home back to Europe in chains. Okay, here's some more pictures. The church. This is the first fort that was built in the Americas. Here's another view from the house, a side view from the house, and this guy down here in the right is the when we went out where we stayed. This was like our back porch. Just a gorgeous, gorgeous place. A really fun trip. So some later explorers, Amerigo Vespucci, we have a lot to say about this guy. He was a Florentine that joined Portuguese expeditions, and he says, nope. He writes this letter, Mundus Novus, which means, hey, we found something new here. There's two giant land masses that we didn't know were here. And the cartographer, there's a German cartographer, I'm not going to even try and pronounce his name, but it's right here, and you can see on this really early map. By the way, the letter was published in 1502. But this cartographer takes Amerigo's name and feminizes it, and it kind of uses the Latin version and names names it America, and it ends up sticking, rightly so, because Vespucci was the first one to say, we have found something new. This quote directly from his letter, those new regions, which we found and explored with the fleet, we may rightly call a new world. So the division between Spain and Portugal here, as everybody's out trying to gain the upper hand in land and resources and the gold and glory for their efforts, the Pope draws an imaginary line called the line of demarcation, and Portugal's basically going to get everything to the east of that line. Spain was going to get everything to the west. And you go, wow, that's a lot better deal for Spain. Well, at this point in 1494, they had no idea how much was out there. Cabral, it comes from Portugal, and Portugal immediately, even with just this on the east side, they really strike it rich. He is going around, he's headed to Africa, right? And he goes around and he goes out so far that he ends up hitting Brazil. They didn't know if it was an island. They didn't know what it was, but they found a lot of great resources. They found gold. They found Brazilian wood. They traded with the locals, set up a trading post, and became even more rich, even after having all of these centers of gold and slaves and, all of this other stuff that the Portuguese, and of course they're going to continue right on around and get to India eventually. Got to talk about Ferdinand Magellan, 1519, first successful, if you want to call it successful, circumnavigation around the world. Charles V of Spain funds this trip. They set out with 5 ships, a little over 250 men. And again, they're looking for a west route to India. Sails across the Atlantic. All right, heads to Brazil, goes south. Right about here, the journey gets really treacherous when they are going through these straits, later called the Strait of Magellan. One ship is lost. Another ship turns around and goes home. The others carry on. They soon figure out they might have made a fatal mistake. They spend 98 days in the beautiful, peaceful expanse of the Pacific Ocean. In fact, the word Pacific is a Latin word for peace, and it was so beautiful and tranquil, and there was no food. So they survived on rats and sawdust for 98 days. Finally, they make it over here to the Philippines in the spring of 1521. They have a little skirmish with some locals. Magellan is killed, put back on the ship. The crew continues on, crosses across the Indian Ocean, back around the bottom Horn of Africa, and back up to Spain by 1522. They made it back with 1 ship and 18 crew members. So, successful circumnavigation and not so successful when it came to the outcome of the journey. Some other notable explorers that were particularly looking for a northwest passage. This guy is John Cabot right here, and he is going to be from the British Empire, from England. He's going to run into Newfoundland, and this as a Genoese merchant. He was funded by the British Empire. No colonies are established on Cabot's trip. The next guy, Jacques Cartier, is this guy right here. And he's going to sail off and hit Newfoundland, sail around for a little bit, explores St. Lawrence, Canada. But again, they're not finding a way through. So they set up a few small trade posts and trade with the locals. And a big thing with France in North America is their trade in fish and fur. So if you think of French fish and fur as those all going together, that is pretty much the extent of what France is able to do in the New World. Okay, the conquistadors. Hernando Cortez, probably one of the most popular, sets out from Cuba with an expedition. Right down here, you got the map, and these guys head over to Mexico. They are headed to the Mexican Empire, or the Aztecs. Montezuma sits at the head of the capital city, Tenochtitlan. Cortez allied himself with rival tribes that were really happy and ready to fight the Aztecs. They had been oppressed, and the Aztecs were always at war with their neighbors, and so they were ready to defeat them. The Aztecs were particularly brutal and would practice human sacrifices and all of those great kinds of things. So 1521, Cortez and the neighbors amass a huge army and march on Tenochtitlan with 85,000 warriors. And they take the lake city, and Montezuma is killed, and the Spanish are victorious. Another guy that's really famous for South America as a conquistador is Pizarro, Francisco Pizarro, 1533. He overcomes the Inca Empire. Now, the Inca Empire is a vast kingdom in the Andes Mountains, modern-day Peru, particularly in this area here. Cusco would be the capital city. But the Incas are already weakened by civil war and disease, and so it took a lot less for them to be overcome. They were overcome pretty easily with the more modern weapons of Pizarro and his men. Atahualpa is captured. The people pay a ransom to get their king back, and then Pizarro executes the guy. So one thing that's going to help you out with remembering these people is the acronyms PIP and CAM. All right. So if you think of Pizarro, Incas, Peru, I'll give you the conquistador, the people group, and the location, Pizarro, Incas, Peru, and CAM would be Cortez, Aztecs, and Mexico. Cortez, Aztecs, Mexico. Okay, and that'll be a good way to remember when you're thinking about what these guys did in reviewing. All right, so extending on, just again, another few honorable mentions. With the English and French settlements in the New World, Roanoke is the oldest, but nothing is lasting there. They kind of set up, and then they kind of disappear. It's still a big mystery today about what happened there. Did they move on? Did they integrate with the Indian population? We don't really know exactly what happened. Jamestown, set by the Virginia Company, 1607, is Captain John Smith and that whole story with the Powhatans and Pocahontas, and it has a really rough start, but they start growing tobacco, and that is a major product with a great demand back in Europe, and so Jamestown succeeds. Okay, you have the Plymouth colony here, 1620, famous pilgrims, the separatists coming from England on the Mayflower and setting up a community there. And then, of course, Massachusetts Bay Colony with the Puritans in 1630. You'll learn a lot more about those guys next year in AP US history. When it comes to the French, again, fish fur. That's kind of what they were known for. They, had a much smaller holdings. It was really just a bunch of trade posts, but they do get possession of a lot of land. They explore St. Lawrence, Great Lakes, Mississippi. In fact, they took the Mississippi River all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, and it opened up Louisiana for settlement. They go down into the Caribbean, pass through the Gulf into and settle at Haiti. So Haiti is today has French as a part of its national language, and Louisiana, of course, is named after King Louis. Okay, in that time period. And that concludes this lesson on European Voyages of Discovery. You have everything that you need for the test, and I hope you enjoyed it.